Brown says, get that India. Big boy.
Call an ambulance! Maybe call a police! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell killer!
Hello and welcome back to an instant reaction podcast for the Tip Sheet. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as 4020. Joining me to break down the first game of the Bazball era for the Blue and Gold is my good mate, Sixties. Parramatta Eels going down 42-26 to the South Sydney Rabbitohs in Indigenous round, big fella. This was, I mean, it sure was one of those games of all time. Yeah, it could have been worse. It could have been a lot worse. It was 22-0 in as many minutes, I believe, or close enough. Johnston scoring in the 26th minute for that fourth try. But the Eels did rally and make it at least somewhat interesting. But suffice to say, not the way Trent Barrett would have liked to have started his tenure as the interim coach of the Eels, and probably reflective of a lot of the same issues that we're seeing from his team this year as well, big fella.
Well, of course, the reality is that we just lost by 16 points to the team that can't beat anyone.
And lost their 5-8 before halftime. Have you heard that one before?
Yes.
Although at least the Eels didn't roll over after halftime like they did against Melbourne. They were actually still competitive in the second half, scoring 3 tries. But the Eels, their own worst enemies in this game, 60s. And before we get too much further into our instant reaction there, I will give a quick shout out to star partners Auburn, Rowan and Parramatta, who, as you all know, are the sponsors of this show and of the Cumberland Furrow in general. And they're fantastic partners for us. I can't say enough about Greg and the crew there. You talk about tough times at the Blue and Gold, but the sort of people that stick firm are, the crew out there at Star Partners. So many thanks there. But let's get into it, mate, because, talk about making a cross for your own back. The Parramatta Eels, I think there were 2 completions from 6 or 7 sets early on. And boy, did the South Sydney Rabbitohs like that. They scored in the 8th, 11th, 20th and 26 minutes. Racing out to a, not just commanding, but a game-winning lead. Let's not kid ourselves there. 22-0. Eels did hit back with tries to Blaze Talangi and Sean Russell before half-time, which then saw Latrell Mitchell in the sin bin for, I got to say, it technically was a hip drop. That was on the more innocuous side of a hip drop in terms of like planting your weight and deliberately dropping. And it was made even more confusing later in the game when Joe Ofungahi was not put in the sin bin for one that looked worse. I don't know. But Eels made it competitive with a try to Morgan Harper in the 42nd minute following halftime. But then the Rabbitohs hit back with a try to Sean Kepi. Then try to Damien Cook, put the game beyond doubt, honestly. But Mike Acevo did bag a late double with Keon Kalamatani also scoring in the 77th minute. So, lots of tries scored. Defense very much optional in this game for both teams. The Rabbitohs, though, too good. They kicked 6 from 7 for Latrell Mitchell. Dion Taupa also attacking on a penalty goal while Latrell was in the sin bin. I look at the team stats here quickly, 60s. Rabbitohs have significantly more possession there, 56-44. Likewise, time possession, plus 5 and a bit minutes. They completed nearly 80%. Eels down at 64%. Eels with more run meters, but less post-contact meters despite less ball. That's almost impressive in a way. 7 line breaks to 4 in Parramatta's favour. Tackle breaks about 26 apiece, 27 for the Eels there, so slightly ahead. Eels the fastest play the ball, so you got that going for us. Neither team diffused kicks well, and that was very evident just looking at the tape there. 20% diffusal rate for South Sydney. It was 50-50 for the Eels. Somehow the Eels had nearly 90% effective tackle rate. Rabbitohs at 87%. 28 missed tackles for both teams, and then 14 ineffective and 13 for the Rabbitohs. And then 16 errors and 7 penalties conceded for the Blue and Gold, which is really the tail of the tape in this one. The Eels were just a lot of really bad errors in that first half, in that first 20, and it just proved to be too big a burden to overcome with South Sydney piling on those early points, mate.
Can we mention that the Eels won both lower grades? Maybe we can talk about that.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that very shortly, and I do stress shortly because it was a good day for the lower grades. What do you say about this, 60s? Because, they rallied to make it competitive on the scoreboard. There was a night. I mean, there was some nice tries scored. There was some fun tries scored. The one that Mike Acevo set up for Sean Russell in the 32nd minute was actually really nice, with a pretty cool in and away wraparound from centre to the winger, reversing the roles, and Sean Russell doing a great job to clear a fallen defender and not get tangled up. But yeah, the reality is more of the same for the Parramatta Eels. Really poor mental lapses, complete inability to stay competitive around the ruck. South Sydney didn't even need to go around them in this one. They just went for them.
I think that's the part that really tells the story of where the Eels were at going through those tries at the start of the game. You'd have to say, I mean, is the word insipid?
Oh, yeah.
In terms of defence, is that accurate?
The Kalama-Matangi try where we went through Jermaine and Blaze, that wasn't good defensive contact from either player there. The South Sydney had a lot of success kicking in behind, and to be fair, they were good kicks, but again, the Eels weren't on point defending them, and it's just bad errors and bad defense around the middle. Not good, to be very kind. In terms of what we saw from players, Blaze was again a mixed bag at fullback, which I'm not going to be upset about. There was some poor defensive play, which is both positionally and contact wise, which is again something that's going to be learning on the job. There was some sparkling offensive play, which again that's just a natural talent there. I think he probably got some of his options wrong with the passes today. I think Marcus Zero probably could have had a hattie if he had passed earlier in one of the backline movements. But, again, we saw that goldfish memory in a positive sense in this game where he makes a mistake and can quickly get that out of the memory log. You know what? Mike Acevo, 60s, 160 metres. That might be the biggest metric we've seen from him in a couple of years. So
yeah, he had an awful start.
He did have a shocking start, though. He looked lost under that high ball. Redeemed himself the next defensive set, making the tackle to drive his opposite into touch. But he looked completely checked out early on. But to his credit, got back into it. I thought Russell and Simonson were solid. I actually like Dylan's involvement. He was trying to stay involved in this game and playing both sides of the ruck, which when we had the ball was good. Reg and Junior tried to set a tone early on, but again, errors and just bad contact around the ruck defensively really exposed our middle. I thought Joey Lussick was pretty poor, and it looked like he either got hooked or pretty aggressively suffered Brendan Hands, who had a good game. So shout out to Brendan Hands there. Bryce Cartwright, again, the numbers don't look amazing, but that was much closer to Bryce at his best in terms of fitness, wasn't it? He had some nice players on both sides of the field, including setting up a Micah Zero try. Ofengai and Tuolangi were busy but made some mistakes. Ofengai with the hip drop tackle, which I imagine he's going to probably miss a couple of weeks for. And Tuolangi had a couple of really bad drops, or at least one really bad drop. So that's where we're at. I don't know what you can sort of break down in a week where our coach was sacked. We just saw more of the same issues we've sort of been speaking about that continue to indicate that the issues with this team go beyond the coach. Like, no matter where you stood on Brad Arthur, if you're for or against him, that there are clearly some pretty big roster issues here for Parramatta. Yeah,
and rather than going into that right now, because I think we've covered that well and truly. I keep coming back to it. We just played the South Sydney Rabbitohs.
My biggest take out of that game is I don't know what the hell hip drop tackle is in terms of getting sin-binned, because the Eels were the big benefactors in that one. Latrell got sin-binned and Joe didn't, and it was like was it the Cowboys 60s this weekend? Yeah, it was Valentine Holmes and Dave Clemmer, wasn't it? Val got sin-binned for making a diving tackle on his goal line where there was no hip drop mechanics in terms of deliberately going off your feet. He was diving to save a try, and then Clemmer
and he got knocked.
That's right, by Tom Dearden, knocked him into the legs. And then later on, and he gets put in the sin bin, Dave Clemmer does a much worse, much more, by definition, textbook hip drop tackle, doesn't get sin binned. Charge sheet comes out this morning, Val doesn't face anything, Clemmer's looking at a couple of weeks on the sideline. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's something similar here with Latrell and Joe. So who knows? Who knows? Yeah. All right. 42-26 full-time wrap there. not good for the Eels, and it doesn't bode well for the future. There is some reason to be at least a little bit optimistic elsewhere, though, isn't there, 60s?
Well, look, just before we get into having a bit of a chat about the lower grades, because we're obviously going to start talking about team changes. People shouldn't have expected anything different to this today, because Trent Barrett had one session with the team.
Yeah, and
Like
Ryan Madison ill, Will Penasini ill. Obviously, and not to say that South Sydney didn't have a disruptive preparation either.
Well, I'm not even going to go into the players that we had missing, because South had players missing. Mm-hmm. It was more the case that you had a scenario where the players, like the dressing room, hadn't been lost, right? So what transpired this week was always going to be a bit of a mental toll on the team, and I think we saw that at the start of the game. It was, as I said, you could see there just wasn't any real connection in the tackles. Like there was the hit and stick really wasn't there, was it? I mean, it was the tries were just too soft at the start of the game, and you blink and it was 22-0 down.
Yep.
And you were messaging me, and as you were saying, they looked like they were tracking towards a 60 blot.
Yeah, we might have undersold how bad the bag could have been when you were giving your worst case prognosis.
Really, what it turned out like is something akin to what we thought, where we were both thinking it was going to be mid-30s to something in the teens in the scoreline, and a 16-point loss was pretty much on that mark. I had the fears that it was going to blow out even bigger, but there was nothing that South Sydney did that was extraordinary.
No,
that was the troubling.
Yeah, they didn't come out here and blow down the doors and make a statement game about how their season's completely saved because they clearly turned the corner. They just didn't drop the ball as much as us. Yeah,
and there was commentary during the match, which was like I put a thought out there not a thought, but I expressed on Twitter that I really didn't expect to see any team changes. We talked about it on earlier in the week. It was never going to happen in the circumstances of this week, because it would have been like putting the boot in for a second time if Trent Barrett had have done that. Now, this, and I think it was maybe it was Warren Smith might have said something similar, didn't he? Towards the end of the game, that it wasn't you weren't likely to see team changes in this first week under Trent Barrett, but going forward, we're likely to see team changes. I think we were going to have team changes this week anyway.
If there hadn't been a change of coach,
look, what happened with Sean Lane, I expected that he was going to be moved to the bench and moved to the middle, because everything was just all out for him all season, playing on the edge. And I was fairly convinced that that was the move that was coming. Had a little inkling that I'd picked up that was a likely move after last week. Did transpire. I expect. Well, I think Salvo's probably in playing his best performance of the season. He's probably given himself at least another week or two out on the wing, and in doing that, you have to think what are the options coming up. So let's talk about that, because we had a win to the New South Wales Cup team, and what was it, 32-24?
32-24, and just one thing on Warren as well. I think he made a bit of a faux pas for anyone that was paying attention on the broadcast. As far as we all know, he said something along the lines of that young Blaze Tolling had taken up his player option, which we believe is contrary to what has actually happened. So I wouldn't read too much into that, unfortunately. But yes, 24.
Unless he's got inside mail.
If he's got the good goss, then God bless you, Warren. You've given us at least something to be happy about this weekend. So assume that it's not true. but maybe Warren was on the good mail there. So 24 for the Rabbitohs, indeed 60s, 32 the Parramatta Eels. Eels keep on keeping on in the Cup. Their turnaround has been outstanding, and they will finish the round. I think results might have gone against them, but they're going to keep in touch with the top four. Try scorers for the Eels in this one: Ethan Martin, Zach Sini, Matt Dury, Matt Arthur, Isaac Lumilumi, and Will Latu. So a few of the young guns getting on there: Martin, Arthur, and Latu. Sanders 4 from 6. For the Rabbitohs, it was Skelton, Kennedy, Jarrett Sublu, and Buddy. Yelene Gordon getting on there in the 62nd minute. So we don't have any advanced stats available right now, or even basic stats technically. But the Eels, this was a pretty back and forth one, 60s. Sort of tit for tat throughout the first half. Eels definitely took the ascendancy early in the second, though. And then the Rabbitohs pegged it back at the end to get close, but never within that 2 or breaching that 2-score deficit. And for the Eels, like we said, if you just go back to their draw now, all teams should be the Parramatta Eels. Since they lost to the... Well, sorry, no, go back there. Since they lost to the Raiders, 30-6, they got blown off the park at GIO Stadium. They inched past the Bears by 2 points, 30-28. They lost by 4 points to the Sydney Roosters in that absurd penalty count game that you spoke about. They easily beat the Blacktown Worker Sea Eagles, 36-22. Had the bye, 7-point win against the Bears. We got a 22-point win. 22? No, I can't even maths. It is 22. It is 22. 22-point win against the Western Suburbs Magpies, and now an 8-point win against the Rabbitohs. They are on a legitimate roll. So again,
it should be 6 in a row, but it's now 5 out of the list.
Exactly, and a bye. So they've done. They lost first 5 games, and there were some close ones in there. They could have beaten the Bulldogs. They could have beaten the Magpies, and they probably should have been closer against the Worker Seagulls. But they were beaten comfortably by the Panthers and the Raiders, and it looked bad. But a couple of fortunate, tight results, and suddenly they're back in it. And I suppose that's part of the frustration for the NRL team, isn't it? Is that maybe 1 or 2 wins elsewhere, and suddenly you've got a bit of momentum and you're climbing the ladder. And we see this in the Cup. And again, credit to Kalis and all the boys down there, because they have not had a full roster by virtue of what's happening in the NRL. They've been sort of chopping and changing and mixing guys around. They've had all sorts of half combinations, and they're just getting the job done. So well done.
Well, they went into today's match with both halves and the dummy half from the successful SG Ball team and from the finals Flegg team from last year. So you start to look at what's happening with that spine there with those 3 positions, and I think it's easy to understand how it's coming good. Although, to be fair, Dejan Arce also had some good games in that run.
He'd been key as part of that big resurgence. So, yeah, the young guns have obviously done a fantastic job. You're talking Martin, Lynn, Sanders, Arthur, Geimer, Latu, Parker. Saxon Pryke's been thereabouts too, but he's gotten lesser minutes compared to some of the other players there. So a lot of young guns standing tall. Likewise, I think there's been senior players standing up and delivering. I think Zach Sini's been pretty solid at fullback. I think that Matt Dury's been outstanding. I think that Woody's probably getting back to a solid semblance of form there in the front row as well. So a lot of contributions across the park. And again, just a reminder that sometimes you just need a couple of close, lucky, tough results going your way.
I think the big call now is when Trent Barrett makes the decision to pull the trigger on maybe some debuts or elevations, because maybe the game against Cronulla's not necessarily the best, but maybe a game when you have potentially either Moses and perhaps Gutherson alongside him back in the team, and you have a bit of a stronger support for players like maybe Charlie Geimer and Matt Arthur to make their debut. So interesting there. Matt Dury has been pushing his claims to be recalled back into first grade. So whilst there was, you have to, in tonight's game in the first grade, I mean, you spoke before about some of the things that you liked. I think it's hard to talk about things that you like in a game, again, where we lost by 16 points to the Rabbitohs, where we leaked 42 points to a team that has struggled and struggled and struggled. So whilst we can find some good points for different players, it's obvious that changes are needed.
No doubt. That was me trying to salvage something.
And I wasn't suggesting otherwise, John. It's just that this was a game where, if they had have lost 42-26 to the Panthers or something like that, with Gutherson and Moses out, and
obviously the context is way different and gives you a lot more reason to try and salvage a silver lining or something similar. But they're taking on the South Sydney Rabbitohs, who'd won a singular game coming into this week, who were missing.
And the pattern that we saw was similar, which is individuals making errors, and the part that was a little bit concerning was, it was actually what I expected, which was that it was just going to be too easy through the middle.
Yeah, and the only circuit breaker moment.
There was no effort on effort.
Yeah,
there was
no way. And the only circuit breaker, if you can call it, difference this week was it wasn't a strong first half or good first half followed by a complete second half capitulation. It was an opening quarter capitulation followed by good second and third quarters or close enough, and then a collapse in the final quarter. So they've just moved around the quarters, but it's still the same amount of football that isn't being played by the team.
Yeah. So now it becomes a matter of when you pull the trigger for those changes. As I said, I don't.
I think you could justify against Cronulla. Like if you're talking about, just talking about pure play development, like let's just get him in there and try and change the energy. But like you said, that also runs a risk of you taking on it. I know that the Sharks, there are still question marks about how high their ceiling is, which I don't think the question has been answered in a positive way recently with the result we just saw against Penrith. But they're still a very, very good team that will, they're going to presumably put the Queeners for us next week.
Oh, look, it probably won't be pretty. And just a reminder to people, we'll be out there at Parramatta League.
The pre-game show, baby.
With our preview show. So please come in and say hello to us, because we need to have a bit of a smile at getting to know more and more people. And we've been blessed with that, the people that come up and say g'day and have a chat at our appearances in the Leagues Club. So, we'll be in the bistro before the game. We'll confirm the time in the podcast.
Correct.
On Tuesday.
Podcast,
it's going to be interesting with this short turnaround with being on Thursday.
Trent's probably only going to get one more training session, won't he?
Well, that's it. That's the other point as well. Is I'm just not sure whether, again, the circumstances
lend
are
itself.
Right. It just wasn't. Look, people were suggesting to me that it needed to be done this week. Again, you're talking about a situation where there just wasn't the time to change things, and where all we were hoping for this week was that the players would respond without team changes being made. I think if there would been the team changes made that needed to be made before this game, there was really the risk of putting the boot in to a playing group which was already pretty down with the events of this week. They've got to move past it now. They're professional footballers. There are no more excuses. It was a tough week.
The week would have taken a huge emotional toll on them too. Like I know we're being critical of what we just saw on the field, but this was like you said, a playing group that hadn't been lost by the coach. So when that happens, it's going to hurt you. And you heard some of the guys speaking about, Brad's impact on their lives. Of course, it's going to hurt them. So I certainly have that much empathy to spare for him. There's no doubt there was a lot of turmoil this week.
Yeah. So Let's just complete the little bit
Yeah.
of news, because there was a win
A surprise,
as well.
a surprise result, because I'm pretty certain we pretty much tipped how the other two games are going to go. A pretty easy win for the South Sydney Rabbitohs in the top grade, a solid win for us in New South Wales Cup, and we said that the one that was going to be probably the most difficult to tip was the upset for the Eels in the Jersey Flegg, because they're taking on the 4th place South Sydney Rabbitohs, and they're coming off a last start loss to the Melbourne Storm, the Eels. And, you know, we're talking about how if they're going to get their season going, have to start banking some of these tough wins, and goodness, they did that. 26-8 winners out at Erskineville Oval today. Tries to Bo Newlands, Muhammad Al-Madin, Raz Namba, Antioch Vitalamarina, and it's then a second to Moe, Muhammad Al-Madin bagging a 67th-minute try. In fact, the Rabbitohs scored the first try in the 5th minute, and it was all one-way traffic after that. Arpa Tweedle tacking on 3 conversions from 5 attempts. No penalty goals for the Eels, or attempts even. So, yeah, what a tremendous effort from the boys here, because based on what we saw from the team list, I don't think they've got a full playing roster available still. There's still guys injured or suspended across the park. Plus, there is a whole host of players up in Cup right now. And they've done a tremendous job, so well done.
Oh, well, I can actually give a rundown on this because I have watched it.
Oh, there we go. We get insight.
Yep.
Beautiful. Good stuff.
Yep. So, look, they were as dominant as the scoreline indicated. The Rabbitohs, I think, were lucky to be ahead at halftime. Parramatta were the dominant team in the first half as well as the second half. The Rabbitohs got a late penalty goal as well to extend the lead out to 8 points to 4 at halftime. But the forwards were really, really dominant. The players that I'd shout out after this game, I thought that Arpa Tweedle had a really strong game at 5'8". The forwards as a unit played really, really well. But just to mention, Sam Tuivasa in his second stint on the field was near unstoppable.
Good to hear.
Saxon Pryke, just a really, really, the motor that he's got on him. I think he played all 70 minutes today. I can't recall him being off the field. Dom DeStratus moved from centre back to the back row.
With Raz Namba coming into the centres, right?
Yep. So they swapped it round because I think Raz was...
He was named. He wasn't named the 11 on Team Was Tuesday, though, so that was... Yeah.
So, anyway, Dom, I think he relished being back in the second row in this game because it was a really busy game that he had. I would have liked to have seen Raf get a few more minutes than what he got, but and I'm not sure exactly what that was, but I don't recall that it was really big minutes. And look, Muhammad Al-Madin, a couple of mistakes, but my goodness, his carries and the final try that he scored, it almost was reminiscent of that try by Jared Hayne in that finals match against St George, where he just sort of seemed to be going through that many players in a weaving run. Well, in this one, Muhammad picked up. I think it was all a bit of a scrappy play off a kick, and then he's picked up the ball and he's gone on this diagonal run right across the field. I reckon he's beaten about 6 or 7 players to plant the ball down with a couple of those players clinging onto him.
We'll have to
under the posts.
Keep an eye out for the New South Wales Rugby highlights of that one to maybe get a gander at the work he did there. So, and I suppose that's the thing about Moe as well. It's a bit like Blaze, isn't it? Where, he's certainly capable of an error, but he'll just put it behind him and get back to work. So, good to hear that he had a strong game.
He's been a good inclusion in the Flegg team after the conclusion of the SG Ball season, and we did see as well listed as the concussion substitute Josiah Funa Iuta today. So he didn't get on the field, but it was interesting to see another elevation from the SG Ball team. Also, a mention to Riley Smith, because I thought Riley was his usual workaholic, busy self, scheming, probing for anything that was around the ruck. I thought he did did particularly well. Look, it was a good. I've singled out players, but it was a good team performance.
Yeah, you don't win 26-8 against the top 4 team if you're not competing across the board. So well done.
Yeah, so we could find a couple of games today that we could talk positively about. It was good to be able to do that. Unfortunately, we got a result which we expected in the first grade match tonight, and it's who knows what lies ahead, mate. There have to be changes, and whether those changes happen this week or the week after, it has to be soon.
Yeah,
it genuinely has to be soon, because we can't keep going on as we are. So look, I honestly I don't want to do a 3-2-1 tonight. I don't think a 16-point loss to the Rabbitohs entitles us to provide a 3-2-1.
no, no.
And it's not putting down some players that had a crack and did the best that they could. It's just, I just don't feel it's a game that warrants giving out our best 3 Eels players tonight. And that's not being disrespectful. It's just being honest in our reaction to this game. So, mate, I think that just about wraps things up.
Yeah.
What have we come in at?
Ticking to 32 minutes right now. So,
I think that's about right.
Yeah. I think in light of the relative no contest that we saw there, because I know the score was closer than it suggested, but the Rabbitohs were never in threat after the opening 22 minutes. So I suppose that's, in terms of the game day wrap-up, that's about it. There's obviously going to be plenty of news to discuss next week. I already see that Josh Hanne's openly expressed interest in the coaching job for the Parramatta Eels, so we'll discuss that in our news podcast. And we will be left to ponder, beyond any issues with the Parramatta Eels, what exactly is a hip drop tackle? And what the punishments are, because the NRL is being classic NRL right now. 60s, thank you for having a chat with me about the action today. I know that everyone is hurting right now. Again, regardless of where you stood about the sacking of Brad Arthur, it's just frustrating to see the Eels struggling on the field the way they are, but that is part and parcel of being a fan, unfortunately. So we go roll with the punches and keep on moving on. And on that note, we'll see you guys in the NRL and News podcast to be recorded on Tuesday. As always, thank you guys for listening. Thank you to Star Partners and Greg and the crew out there for backing TCT. And I think it's fitting, even with a loss, to give you the final say, mate.
Go you mighty Eels.